let's talk about eugenics, because I'm reminded of this. I just reread Hayek's The Counter-Revolution of Science, and it's not at all about eugenics. It's about an earlier, actually the first generation of scientism, but how, the cloak of the science, I mean, we're still debating this today, but how the cloak of scientism involved tremendous abuses of government power, and the arrogance and elitism and racism of the eugenics movement was really just this belief that you could use power to make everything perfect, until we discovered through Hitler that was just wickedly evil.
Yeah, I think it's really surprising for students. I think it's really, really surprising for most people. It's hard to get across to them just how racist America was the most racist period in American history, I think, is from around 1880, 1890 to about, maybe to about World War II, but at least through the 1920s, because so many of the experts, and Rachel, you can talk to this with specific details here in just a second, but actually believed, right, in scientific racism, pseudo-scientific techniques to determine which people are superior to other people. And it's in this environment, I know we're not talking necessarily yet about Booker T. Washington, but it's in this environment that Booker T. Washington gets handed the mantle of leader of the race. And he gets condemned by everyone because he's in this horrific situation in which, one of the reasons he writes his autobiographies, the several books that he writes, is to try and demonstrate that black people are capable of doing these things and being entrepreneurial and succeeding, and they're not, contrary to these claims that they're racially inferior, they're not actually racially inferior. I mean, he uses his life as sort of, the example of that, and he tries to do that at Tuskegee as well. But I think many Americans really struggle with the fact that there's a really good book by Daniel Rogers called Atlantic Crossings, which talks about the interconnectedness of European thought and American thought at this time. And one of the ways in which that's happening is, of course, on eugenics as well. And so, yeah, you can speak to it in more detail. But.
I mean, just the sheer popularity in the academic community of eugenics, we just forget about it.
Was it a top-down thing, or was it a bottom-up thing? Was this a natural result of emancipation and people being anxious about black people having equal rights?
So I think I think from a historical perspective, I think it begins actually before. I mean, you can see tracks that it exists, scientific racism that exists all the way back into the 1830s and whatnot. But I think what it does is it confirms, right, many of the racial biases that exist within most Americans at the time. And so I think I would argue it's more of a top-down process that then when people learn about it, they're like, oh yeah, absolutely. You
can feel better about your...
Yeah, you can be like, well, the experts agree with me. That I'm superior to these people. And that's sad, but I think that's the truth. I think that racism already existed, and then the sort of scientific racism, which was very present among the elites, which we know sort of provides an intellectual justification for what most white people already thought.
And of course, one of the most surprising things for people to learn is that eugenics was the basis of the minimum wage concept.
Yeah.
And it's totally explicit. It's not like a conspiracy theory that Marcus and I came up with. You just open these 1905, 1908 economics textbooks, ones that are used all over the country, and they're saying, well, literally, and I'm sorry to have to repeat this, but they say things like, well, we can't chloroform them all right now, so let's just raise the minimum wage high enough to disemploy them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
It really is, and it's anti-black and it's anti-immigrant and anti-women.